This is Revs Confidential with Julian Cardillo and Frank DeLappa.
Welcome to Revs Confidential, everybody. We're back. We're on video yet again. Good to be with you. Make sure you subscribe to Cover the Pitch on YouTube. Make sure you join my Substack. Just launched this week. Make sure you follow my good friend and co-host Frank DeLappa at Frank DeLappa on X. Frank, we made it 2 weeks in a row. How you doing?
Yeah, good. Streak's going.
Yeah, streak's going. I'll tell you one thing, though. Streak is over for the Revolution. 9 games unbeaten in league play. Came to an end. Lost 1-0 at home to FC Cincinnati. Not a great game. Wide open at times, mostly in the first half. And then, the Revolution, they were shorthanded on offense. I think that was really the story of the game. That was the story of the game, and I think that might be the story of the early summer. Seth McCumber asked Caleb Porter at the end of the game, what does he make of his attacking core? And, Caleb Porter kind of said, injuries aside, they need someone to come in and score goals, and no one's really taken advantage of that chance. So they'll probably be active in one way, shape, or form this summer. But for me, Frank, I thought, at times was an even game against Cincinnati, but truly, they really were crying out for a striker, and they just didn't have one.
Yeah, that's the difference in the game. Kai Kamara could have started for either team if he would stay here. If he would have stayed here, he would have been starting for the Revs on Saturday night, and they might have done all right. But yeah, that's the difference right there. You got to have somebody up front that can put away a goal. Cincinnati didn't play great; they didn't do that much. But you got one guy that can put it away. 2 guys really. Under trying circumstances with not that much going on, an away game. That's the difference in these games.
Yeah, I know that the score sheet said that Kevin Denke scored the goal, and he did. But I thought the actual most dangerous player on the field was Orejano for FC Cincinnati. You could really tell in the first 3 minutes the kind of guy he was, and he was unlocking the Revolution back line, which has really been pretty good all season, certainly one of the best in the league. And I forget who it was on the call of the game, but someone had said that these games with FC Cincinnati are typically really tight, that it's usually like a 1-goal margin. And that proved to be the case again. So the Revolution defended well, but I think it was just that little bit of quality that ultimately unlocked them. On Kevin Denke's goal, I really just saw a player who wanted to get to the ball and did. It was that simple. He really just needed to score that goal. Dangerous players do dangerous things, and scorers score. And that was the difference. I think Kevin Denke did his job. And then on the flip side for the Revolution, I mentioned already that they had some injuries and the depth isn't where it needs to be. By the end of that game, Frank, Peyton Miller was almost playing like a second striker. Attempted a bicycle kick. Was trying to get on the end of some crosses from the opposite flank from Eli Feingold and Carlos Heel. And I think, when you have a 17-year-old fullback trying to be the finisher, I think that gives you a good sense of just how things are going offensively for the Revolution.
Yeah, a really good duel with DeAndre Yedlin. Peyton Miller really showed himself well. But, I wrote today about a year ago, the Revolution beat Cincinnati 2-1. Who scored the goals? Giacomo Vrioni, who at that point had 5 goals as a starting striker. Okay, the Revolution could use something like that. We're not trying to bring back Giacomo necessarily, but this isn't that demanding a thing. And the Revolution's kind of failing to, get somebody in there that can really score goals and be dependable. I think Leo Campana could be the answer, but, he hasn't been shown to be durable yet. And I just don't think there's any reason why you don't get another striker. That's the one thing that's really missing. You have a pretty good roster. This team can really compete. But if you're not finishing, and you don't have a threat in there, the Revolution had tons of crosses. I think they had 13 free kicks, 8 corners. I don't know how many crosses. Caleb said quite a few, whatever it was. But if you don't have a target guy in there, even if he's not putting them away to distract and, draw defenders, that stuff's not going to work. So, it's just, we pointed out, I guess that's the one thing that's missing.
Yeah, I said this in my article after the game that, you've got Thomas Chankalai, who's predominantly a winger, starting up top as a lone striker, and he's not really known for his target play, and he's probably not going to head in any goals. And so that's automatically a little bit of a lose-lose, especially when you're going up against Matt Miazga, who had a pretty good game for FC Cincinnati. Caleb Porter pointed that out too. Ignatius Ganago hasn't been that prolific either, but I think he gets it. I think he knows how to use his physicality, how to use his speed. He's more of a winger as well, but I think he's just better because of his dynamism, because of his mobility at being a striker when necessary. I think durability is a really interesting word with this team because over the years, looking back 30 seasons now, they've had, strikers especially have had real trouble staying on the field in New England. I mean, Taylor Twellman scored 101 goals, but, he got injured a lot too. And they were all different types of injuries. They were, getting kicked in the face and hamstring issues. And of course the concussion issues. And, even in the more modern times of this club, I mean, how many times did they get all three DPs on the field in the Bruce Arena era? I mean, in a way, it was good that they had Gustavo Bo and Adam Buxa, because if one was out, chances are the other guy would be there. And that actually worked out to their benefit, I think. In this case, it's really the one DP up top, and it's Leo Campana, and then everybody else is kind of a playmaker or a wing player. And so, I mean, yeah, it's the durability issue keeps propping up for the Revolution, Frank.
Yeah, they haven't had a striker score in double figures since Buxa and Bo in 2021. This is going on 4 years. It's probably not going to happen this year. So, I think Caleb brought that up too. He says you got to have a guy that scored 10 goals at striker. So, I guess we're just kind of waiting for that to happen. I mean, Giacomo got 9, plus he got 3 in other competitions last year. So, just get somebody that's a little better than Giacomo, and the team could be okay.
Yeah, one would think, right? We'll see. I mean, the window is going to open up soon, and I can't imagine the Revolution are going to stay put. I think on the plus side, as I mentioned, the defense is playing well on both sides of the ball. For the most part, they're keeping out bad goals, and also Eli Feingold and Peyton Miller are finding ways to get forward. Eli Feingold did not extend his scoring streak to 3 games. He didn't do that, but all in all, still had a pretty good game. I think he tried really hard. He got up the field, put in a lot of crosses. Ditto for Peyton Miller, as I mentioned before. But ultimately, you really need a true striker to help complete the formation. And I think when there's someone to get on the end of things, it makes Carlos Gil look a little bit better too. Carlos Gil, when teams have figured him out and are putting, 2, 3, 4 guys around him at sometimes, he really has to be crafty and figure out how to create his space and make his passes. That's one thing, that does sometimes happen. But when he's being zeroed in on and he also has nobody to serve the ball to, that's even worse. And I think that's sort of the position that the Revolution were in against Cincinnati, Frank.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's no reason, if you've got a guy like Carlos Gil on your team, you can find a striker that's going to say, I want to play with that guy, So there's a lot of things going against the Revolution, the climate, artificial turf, the teams, hasn't been consistent winning losses. How many guys want to play in that huge stadium? But, if you use Carlos Gil as your recruiting tool, I think a lot of guys would want to play with Carlos. And Carlos needs somebody up there, too. He'll get frustrated if he can't find anybody up there. And, there's no reason not to bring somebody in.
Well, fortunately for the Revolution, they're on short memory. They're going to play Nashville on Wednesday night at home. It's a chance to rebound. Although, there really are no easy games in the Eastern Conference. Nashville has done reasonably well under BJ Callahan, and it's going to be the first game these two teams have played each other since the start of the season, and a lot has changed. I think the Revolution have figured out their tactics, and so have Nashville. I think both teams have bought into a system with 2 relatively new head coaches as well. And also, I'm expecting another tight game because typically when the Revs and Nashville play, especially in Foxborough, you're looking at like maybe a goal. I don't even know if there's ever been a game in Foxborough between New England and Nashville with more than 2 goals. Someone is going to have to correct me on that one, but on the plus side, I do think the Revolution are kind of built for those more cagey games. I think they want to get on the break and they want to leverage Carlos Heel in the right spots, but at the same time, this back line has played a number of teams pretty tight. And so in a sense, being at home, being in a game against Nashville that's a little bit more tactical, I think that might suit the Revolution, Frank.
Yeah, I think we're not going to see too many good games at Foxborough. We haven't seen any so far. Because that's 5 games, a total of 9 goals scored. That's 6 games actually, and a total of 9 games scored. Teams are coming in here and they're just not playing at all. That's really been going on for a while, and they're just trying to keep things tight and maybe hit on the break with a counterattack or two. And the Revolution's got to figure out how to deal with that. I think that actually the Revolution is better on the road. Doesn't matter who they're playing because they sort of have that figured out, right? They played a ton of games there, have a winning record, and like a 7-game unbeaten streak on the road. At home, not as good. It's just a different dynamic here. And it's not even a home field advantage for the Revolution so far. A lot of these guys, have only played like 5 or 6 games here. They don't really have Foxborough as their home. They don't feel it's, like a huge home field advantage, I don't think. So, I think Nashville's going to come in. I think 2 goals was maybe a 2-0 game. That was the highest scoring game that we're going to get. So, I think it's going to be tight. But I might disagree with you. I'm not sure that's in Revolution's favor because unless they can get somebody in there that can score, who's going to score?
Yeah, I guess all I meant by that is that there's not going to be a player on Nashville that's going to cut them apart the way Denke did. And it's going to be a little bit more tactical. I think the fact that it's turf, they know how to play on it. The opposition is going to be a little bit more reserved. No guarantee that it's going to be an easy game for the Revolution. I just mean that from my point of view, when things have really fallen apart, they've been on the road and teams just hit them one at a time, like the Orlando game, for example, like the Philadelphia game earlier in the season. I think that's a little bit easier to avoid at home against Nashville and then later on in the week against Colorado too. But listen, I agree with you, Frank. I think there's only so much that Carlos Heel can do. He's the leading scorer of the team right now. He's, still the attacking talisman. He's the captain. He needs some help. And certainly the tactics have gotten a little bit better, but the issue with the offensive depth is it's keeping the team back right now. And it's unfortunate because I really do think that they have figured something out.
Yeah, it's a team it's a pretty good roster. And look to get this far with only one, no striker scored more than 2 goals. I mean, their total striker goals is like 3 or 4, and to get this far, have a winning record, it tells you that they really have something going here. It would just be too bad if they don't, get that problem solved. So I think we were talking about this a few months ago too, right? So earlier on in the season. So, I guess that theme's still there.
Let's change gears a little bit because as we teased last week, the Revolution are now competing for some attention. The Club World Cup started, and now we have a sample size of all 3 MLS teams, Inter Miami and Los Angeles FC and the Seattle Sounders. Now, I know that there are a lot of naysayers about this tournament. They don't like how it's been organized. They don't like that it's happening at all. Because of the amount of fatigue on the players and that these are sort of glorified friendlies and sort of a money grab from FIFA. Let's put that aside for a second because there are 3 MLS teams in this tournament. And when there's competitive soccer to be played, you have to evaluate MLS. This is a measuring stick for the league. Seattle has played Botafogo, which is one of the top teams ever in Brazil. Miami has played Al Ahly, which is probably the best African team ever. Certainly the best team historically in Egypt. And now Los Angeles FC has played Chelsea, one of the true juggernauts of the English Premier League. Now, MLS teams have been outscored 4-1, and Miami got a 0-0 draw with Al Ahly. But I have to tell you, Frank, they're doing a lot better than I thought they would. I was prepared for LAFC to get absolutely destroyed against Chelsea. And to be fair to Chelsea, I think they were probably playing at half speed. But even so, what I've been really pleasantly surprised by is that MLS teams are hanging more so than I've seen, even in friendlies, even when teams are going at half or a quarter speed. We're not in the era where the Seattle Sounders play Manchester United at home and get blown out 7-0. It's changed a little bit. And I think part of that is just the growth of MLS. I think part of that is the quality of players that the US have coming in. Also just the ability to open up the rosters a little bit. Of course, we want them to be opened up a little bit more. I'm under no false pretenses. I think it's going to be really hard for any of these teams to get out of their group. I'm not trying to suggest that there are miracles afoot, but I think the level of play got a little bit closer, Frank. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, you're probably right, Julian. I would say that's true. But MLS will never compete with the top European clubs if they don't totally open up their rosters. Yeah, and they shouldn't. It shouldn't be expected. So I think they can hang with them, but when it really comes down to it, they're not going to beat those teams. Certainly not going to beat them when it counts. So it's a matter of economics and how these leagues and everything is set up. But MLS is coming close to sort of maxing out sort of this model, and that's kind of what people are looking at around the world. A lot of people want to kind of do what MLS is doing, have salary caps and great marketing schemes and control their stadiums, have nice presentation of games, all that stuff. So I think they can do that, and you can take your league pretty far doing that. But when it comes down to it in these games, when it really gets down to it, you've got to have a roster, an open checkbook, and somebody paying the bills. You get what you pay for, basically. So it's caveat emptor, guys. So you can't expect MLS teams to really do well any better than they're doing.
Well, and I think you're right. I think you're right that the level is sort of maxed out. And what's insane is that a lot of these guys, a lot of these Premier League teams are owned by Americans. A lot of the same Americans who have interest in MLS as well. And if they did lift the cap and there was open spending, then you could theoretically see some of these MLS clubs spend as much as these EPL and La Liga clubs. That's what they're doing in Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Egypt. I mean, that's exactly what's happening. I also think you really raise an interesting point, Frank, about what MLS is exporting abroad. The match presentation, the ownership of the stadiums. That's a real pivot. Even the marketing of the game. That's a major pivot, and I think it also has to do with what FIFA has done in creating this event. I think it's billed as sort of this attempt at inclusion and inclusivity and expanding the tournament and really making it feel like a World Cup for clubs. But, not too long ago, UEFA tried something not too dissimilar with the Super League, and it got honestly rioted out of existence. Basically, European fans revolted and said no, like they want to uphold their traditions and have their leagues and focus on the Champions League and not do any sort of Super League. And I think Gianni Infantino and FIFA have realized that there's a way around that to involve all the other confederations and create a Super League of their own, especially when you consider the amount of cash that's available to the winner of this tournament, which is almost certainly going to be a European team. So it's sort of a way to shoehorn in the Superliga, the Super League, but not in the way that we expected 2 or 3 years ago, Frank.
Yeah, exactly. Good. I think the European, the fans or supporters, want to support the integrity of their leagues, of their national leagues, which I think is something worth fighting for. This subverts all that stuff. But this wouldn't work, I don't think, without the Saudi investment fund. You know, but it's going to work so far. It's also a harbinger of the future. You know, Super League, everybody's saying that's going to happen inevitably somehow. Maybe it is, and maybe this is. You're right. This is how it is. There's going to be a time when there's no off season. I think that just started now, right? I mean, all these things are taking sports and soccer to their, if not logical, their ultimate conclusion, which is 365, right? Games all the time. So I'm not sure how that exactly plays out, but I think that's what we're seeing. You know, this is the first step.
Well, and, you know, I'm sort of wondering what players' unions in Europe specifically do to counteract this. Because while I said last week that, you know, just take Christian Pulisic, you know, that he probably should be with the national team a year before the World Cup, I also recognize what he's saying and what other players are saying, that they're tired, that they've had long seasons, that they played domestic leagues and domestic tournaments and the Champions League, in addition to international games. And now they're doing international club tournaments in the summer and international friendlies and tournaments with the national team, and have to report to preseason. And off season is like 3 weeks. You know, when you look at the calendar, the end of the Premier League was the beginning of May. That was already a month and a half ago, and some of these guys are still going. And so, yeah, I mean, I'll be very curious to see what, if anything, the players have on their side to sort of bargain with. And I think, you know, I hate to say it, but I do think that the players sort of recognize that this is inevitable in a sense. And I think they want to be part of the revenue. I think they want some kind of a revenue sharing agreement, which basically says, yeah, if you're going to work me 11 out of 12 months a year, I need a piece of this pie, certainly bigger than the one that I'm getting. And I think you're right, Frank. And I also think it's a little bit of a shame that a game that is so steeped in tradition is now so entrenched in financial interests that really just don't understand it. It's perverting the game.
Yeah, that's a good word for it. We're losing something. I don't know how, but I don't think the players or anybody can really. I don't think anybody can really stop this. What's happening? And I think FIFA is sort of out ahead. They're saying, look, somebody's going to do this. Whether it's John Henry and the Premier League owners or whoever, Florentino Perez at Real Madrid. They're just going to push this thing to the limit. So I mean, if there was 367 days in the year, they would go for that. It's just inevitable. I just don't know how it plays out. Like you say, the players, it's going to take a huge toll on them. I don't think they have any power to really do anything about it, except for maybe, like you say, apply for some sort of, revenue sharing. I did a good interview with Brad Friedel recently, and he's actually doing some announcing for the Club World Cup. A bit of shilling for it, that's what his job is. But he recognizes that this is really putting players under a lot of pressure to play and maybe you're overworking these guys. But he also pointed out, he said, look, when I was playing, you don't know until it's over. I mean, you want to play every game you can, get as much out of it, because when it's over, you're done. That's it. And he had a long career. Brad played till he was 40 and he still misses it. He would have kept playing. So they're torn, and that's a real tough call for the players, and the coaches are seeing their players are going to come back really exhausted. That's going to be a tough call. I don't know who makes the call on all that stuff.
Well, it's interesting, and it's a little bit different at the international level, but still FIFA and Gianni Infantino at the top. I was thinking about this earlier today. It's like, now that we're starting to see teams qualify for the World Cup, it's always nice when you see a country qualify for the first time. But Jordan has never qualified for the World Cup, in part because Asia is highly competitive, and they only get 5 spots. We're going to see several new teams qualify for the World Cup for the first time, and it's because of the expanded field. And I'm not against more teams playing, getting the chance to experience the World Cup, but it's got to be earned. And there was something nice about having 32 teams, and now it's 48, which is, it's a difference of 16 teams, which is significant. That's a massive difference. And so I'm thinking to myself earlier, like, let's say that all of a sudden the traditionalists prevail and people say, you know what, let's contract the World Cup again. How in the world would that possible? How would that even be possible? Because the way the voting works, countries are not going to suddenly vote against vote for making the World Cup harder to qualify for. They're not going to lose the opportunity to make money and have exposure at the biggest sporting event in the world. And I think it's a 1-for-1 with other matters related to FIFA as well. And not just FIFA, some of the other governing boards of soccer as well. So like the incentive is there for these federations and for these countries to just keep expanding, because why wouldn't you?
Well, it's inevitable. You're right. I think once you make that jump, you're not going to cut back. But 32 to 48 is a logistical nightmare. If you protract it out, it's 40% more games is what it comes down to. It's whatever, how many more teams, but it just turns into a real logistical problem, and it dilutes the importance of all the games, all the games that aren't elimination games, and it also opens up. Now look, soccer's a very even game. It's a fairest game that we have come up with as a species for team sports. Okay, so now you're going to have a lot of really close games, and then the first round of eliminations, you're going to have a lot more close games. You're going to have a ton of games that go to penalty kicks, and that's not really what you want. I mean, team that wins this is going to have to play 8 games. So 14, so there's a lot of games to be played, and then you got the chance of playing like 4 or actually 5 of those games could go to extra time. That's a lot. It really adds on to the thing if you just do all the math within just a short amount of time, over 38 days. Now, 38 days for a sporting event, that's a record by far. You've been to like World Cups, Julian, you know what it's 30 days is a long time. It's really tough for everybody, man. And everybody's exhausted before it's over. That last week, people are just like, wow, and then they're on afterburners. You get through it. Now you're talking about 38 days. That's really another week. I mean, the Olympics, I think, is 17. Maybe it's a couple more days now. This is twice as long. That's really a long time. So it's not just a matter of letting in a few more teams and, it's a good thing. You're turning this thing into something. And also, like you say, it has to mean something to qualify for the World Cup. And if FIFA and the World Cup aren't setting a bar for competition, who will?
Yeah, well, and the only thing I'll add to that is that it was really cool when Korea and Japan did a joint World Cup, and it is really cool that USA, Canada, and Mexico are doing a joint World Cup in 2026. But that makes sense. Now the next level is that intercontinental, we're going to have the same tournament in Morocco and Spain and Portugal and Paraguay and Uruguay. It doesn't make any sense. It just looks dumb. It's totally cheapening the event. But anyway, I don't want to put things on a damper. So actually, let's transition to teams preparing for the World Cup. The United States. They won 5-0 against Trinidad and Tobago in the Gold Cup opener. Listen, we don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but they were going to win that game. I don't care who the U.S. had on the field. They were going to win that game. Maybe not have been 5-0, but that was a really young. It was a kind of a combination of a really young and also really kind of old Trinidad and Tobago team, and the U.S. just kind of ran circles around them. And, the real story for me, Frank, and I wrote about this yesterday, is that Matt Turner was benched. Matt Freese from NYCFC comes in, and, all of a sudden, that to me is the first real shot across the bow for Turner, that he hasn't gotten playing time, that in the time that he has been on the field, whether for club or country, form hasn't cut it. I know that there's this move in the works for him to go to Olympique Lyon. Now, I don't know if Matt Turner is going to be a starter there either. I believe that that's the intention, that he's going to be the number one, but he was supposed to be the number one at Nottingham Forest too. And then, that fell apart in a matter of weeks. Now, that's going to be hard. The French league is really tight. It's really competitive, highly technical, and he's going to have to play Europa League. So that's a big jump, and it's really interesting to see the change. From when he was playing for the Revolution, saving penalty kicks in MLS, getting looks at the national team, slowly breaking his way in, and now he's been in the Premier League for 3 years, and his job is gone because ostensibly he's not playing. Tim Howard is the only goalkeeper in my memory who's been the starter for 2 consecutive World Cups. And if this keeps up, might be somebody else next summer, Frank. Now, to be fair, I do think that Turner is still the best of all the players in the pool. But I think it's a fair warning shot.
Yeah, no, Matt's he's got to get games wherever he goes, whatever team it is. And I agree with you. Olympique Lyon is not a guarantee. He's got to go to a place where he's going to start. He's got to get that guarantee. Now, I think we've seen that since Matt's gone over there, his basic vulnerability is playing with his feet is not great, and you've got to be able to do that. In the Premier League and everywhere you go now. So he's just got to get better there. So maybe there's a team that doesn't mind. If he's still going through a bit of a evolution there, because that's the one weakness Matt has. But he's got to get the games. If he gets the games, I think he'll be sharp. He'll be ready to go. And then it's a battle, and he probably could win that. But look at Matt Freese. Is pretty sharp. Those guys are in midseason form. So I think Pochettino's going with the guys that he looks at. And he says this guy's sharp. He's ready to go. And you can see Matt was a little rusty against Switzerland. Definitely wasn't his fault that it was 4-0, but it didn't look like the great Matt Turner, that would make a game like that and maybe do something that was really unexpected to keep some goals out. It didn't look like that Matt Turner.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Actually, I didn't do this on purpose, but I was thinking, he needs to go to a place like this. He needs to go to Copenhagen, kind of a small club what's the right word? Yeah, a small club for a big scale. So probably like a Champions League team that is really just happy to be there. That he's going to face a lot of shots playing for Copenhagen in the Champions League, or a team like this. Doesn't have to be Copenhagen. Lyon is a tough one because they are not title contenders, but they're almost expected to at least finish second or third behind PSG. And I think if you have a shaky goalkeeper who's letting in questionable goals and turning what should be wins into ties, I think that's an issue. And I think the margin for error at Olympique Lyon is going to be really, really tight for Matt Turner. Also, Paulo Fonseca is the coach there, and he was the coach at Roma. And Paulo Fonseca is known for making very quick decisions with his goalkeepers. I think Roma went through 3 or 4 goalkeepers with Fonseca as coach. And I know this because I watched Roma week after week. So I think if Turner has 2 or even 1 poor game, especially at the start of his time at Olympique Lyon, that'll be a big problem. Now for the U.S., I don't have a lot of confidence in the other goalkeepers a year out from the World Cup. Chris Brady is untested. I agree that Matt Freese is very sharp. I like what I've seen from him in MLS, but he's also very untested. I also don't know that Zach Steffen deserves a second look. Patrick Schulte maybe deserves more of a run out. I think he's been pretty impressive with the Columbus Crew. And then you kind of look elsewhere in the pool. Ethan Horvath he's a Cardiff City. Maybe that's worth another look at some point. And then there are a lot of guys that just have kind of been in and out. Drake Callender and Gaga Slonina. So I don't know. It's a big question mark though. Shaka Hislop was on ESPN FC last week, and he basically said that this is the weakest he's ever seen the U.S. goalkeeping pool, which sounds like a crazy thing because, no matter what you say about the U.S., it seems like we've always had really, really high quality goalkeepers. But, right now it's a little bit of a drought in that position. Yeah,
back in Shaka's day in the 80s, playing college at American University in the 90s, he saw some really good ones. Went up against him. I don't know what happened to the pool. It didn't get a lot better after those years. So I will say this, I guess what I'm saying about Matt Turner is he's got to go to a place where the coach wants him. Does Paulo Fonseca want him? If he wants him, I think he's also loyal to the guys he wants. Now, I don't know if they've gone over that, right? He would probably go with him. But if you're putting in Matt Turner in a position where the coach maybe wants him, maybe he doesn't, that's not a good sign. He's got to go to a place where they absolutely want him. Now, I think John Textor owns both those teams. There's a relationship, this and that, but that still doesn't guarantee that, this is going to get done, and it's going to get done for the right reasons. All right. So whoever's got the connections, whoever Matt's agent is now, they've got to line that up.
Yeah, and I also, I think one of the reasons why this hasn't happened, number one, Turner is in camp right now with the U.S., so this may get announced later. But I think Olympique Lyon is also undergoing some financial strain, and so there's a good chance that this doesn't happen. Regardless, he's got to find a place. I personally just enjoying peak level Matt Turner. I'd like to see him go to a place where he is wanted, Frank, and also a place that's a good fit. It may end up being Olympique Lyon. That's a good fit, but I have my doubts. So we'll just have to see. But I think if the U.S. has any chance of doing any kind of damage at the World Cup, regardless of what the tactics look like and how they are in terms of form and where the coaching situation is, they need their starting goalkeeper to be able to keep them in games. That's something that has been a part of every World Cup, even the bad World Cups. Casey Keller standing on his head with 9 men against Italy in 2006. They got a tie. Tim Howard, up until the last 2 World Cups, had the record for single game saves against Belgium in Brazil. Brad Friedel, he became Brad Friedel because of the 2002 World Cup, one of the best goalkeepers in that tournament. So, U.S. needs to figure out their goalkeeper situation. In a sense, that is almost as urgent as what's going on at striker. But we'll leave that to the side for now.
Yeah, I think Brad Friedel saved 2 penalties in that World Cup. That was an incredible run to the quarterfinals. Matt Turner might be capable of doing that kind of thing too. He was really, really good in 2022. So things change though. So the Revolution or the U.S. is going to need somebody like that, if not Matt, to come through. And I don't know who it's going to be if it's not Matt Turner.
Frank, I'm just about ready to wrap up the show, but I wanted to plug one last thing before we do. We're about to enter sort of the dog days of summer. 4th of July is like 2 weeks away, and Revolution are about to really be the only show in town. And I say that because yesterday, as of recording, the Red Sox traded their best hitter to the San Francisco Giants. And the Red Sox were sort of like a borderline, probably not, but maybe playoff team. Now, the Red Sox are, of course, more popular than the Revolution, but I think that there's an opening here for the Revolution. There is going to be, I think, some frustration about the Red Sox with the way that things have been managed, the fact that they've got these really wealthy owners, but they seem to be cutting instead of investing in the team. And conversely, with the Revolution, maybe aside from the striker position, it seems like Caleb Porter has the team he wants, and he's got some exciting players. And I think when they get healthy, there's a chance to go on a run and get some attention. I was looking at a tweet earlier today. I think the Revolution were one of the top crowds in MLS this whole weekend for the Cincinnati game. And you mentioned earlier the amount of goals that they've scored. I think 9 goals in 6 games, which is really low. Man, there's an opportunity here. And it would be good to see them capitalize on it, because I think they're not going to be competing with too many other teams at the moment.
Yeah, that's a good call. But I think that, if they want to go that direction, though, I don't think it's a matter of just like having a good team and winning some games. I think they got to get somebody in here with a profile too. Then people will go, I think, and I think they would go whether the Red Sox were good or not. But it's a good team, but it's pretty anonymous. Carles Gil is, one of the better players we've ever seen around here, and, certainly worthy of, paying the whatever they charge him to go, I would definitely recommend that. But he's low profile. If you brought in a couple high profile guys or even just one, that would get people's attention. That would, along with winning too. So, not saying I'm seeing that happening. The other thing is, look at this team's not on, regular TV too. So, that's another way that they're kind of hurting themselves too. Like even if people aren't going to the stadiums, like you say, if the Red Sox are down, people would be tuning these guys in. They're not doing that either. So you got to give them a reason to go to the stadium or to get into Apple, one of the two. And I think it's bringing in a striker. It's got to be a profile guy or a guy that just looks like he can score a bunch of goals and does it.
Well, I don't know too many people that like the accessibility issues with Apple. Maybe the production is good, and I think it is pretty good, but the accessibility issue is really tough. But I'll say, Frank, the only issue with bringing another guy on is that they're sort of tapped out on designated players at the moment. Well,
I think they have room for one. So, right? I think there's one. They've been holding this one spot. Yeah. Maybe it's not a DP, but it's a.
They got something.
There's something.
They got something. They got
designated something. Yeah.
Yeah, they've got Heel, Chankalai, and then is Campana considered a DP?
I don't think so.
No. Okay. Well, maybe they do have a spot then. Well, listen, Campana isn't cutting it. It came out, more or less. That's what Caleb Porter said after the Cincinnati game. So we'll see. But let's leave it there, Frank. Thanks everybody for tuning into Revs Confidential. We will be covering the Nashville game and the Colorado game soon after that. So probably in all likelihood, we'll not have a podcast until after the Colorado game this weekend. But thank you for tuning into Revs Confidential on the Cover the Pitch YouTube and the Cover the Pitch Substack. You can continue to subscribe to us on Patreon. Patronage starts at just $2 a month. You'd be supporting two local, longtime New England-based soccer journalists. Make sure you follow Frank on X at Frank DeLappa. Follow me at Julian Cardillo at the same place. Thank you to Neil Rosenthal for the Revs Confidential theme song, which you heard at the top of the show in my brand new intro, which I love and I think Frank loves too. And this is Revs Confidential.